Welcome to Adjusting, a safe space for candid conversations about mental health and well-being with your host, Justin G. Nelson. Whether you're recovering from trauma, redefining your purpose, managing mental health, or simply craving more authenticity, this show is for you. I hope something resonates with you and helps you on your own personal journey. So sit back, relax, and let's start adjusting. And welcome back to episode 9 of Adjusting Podcast with your host, Justin G. Nelson. Since I still don't have sponsors yet, we're manifesting that for season 2. This is how you can support me and follow me on other pages. If you're into plant-based healing, nutrition, vegan recipes, follow me on Earthy and Cultured. If you're into learning more about social media marketing, branding, and design, follow me on Nelson Design Lab. If you are into men's fashion, you can follow my men's fashion lookbook, The Detailed Gentleman. Or if you want to support me and follow my performance and creative journey, you can follow me on my personal Instagram at Justin G. Nelson. Shout out to TJ Bowden, who does the editing for my podcast. And like always, if you get a second, check out his podcast, Tea with TJ Podcast. Cool. So we got that out the way. Now, like I do on most of my episodes, I want to invite you to a breathing exercise so that we can make this safe space really comfortable, really grounded, and you can just zone out and tune in for this episode. This episode will be a touchy one, and this is not a pun, but it is one that is kind of delicate. So ground your feet. Put them shoulder width apart. Relax your hands on your thigh. Slow your breathing down. Relax your shoulders. Relax your jaws. Relax your mind. And we're going to take a deep breath in on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And let it out. 1, 2, 3. If you are driving, you can do this later. Okay, one more time. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, and breathe out. 1, 2, 3. All right. So today's episode is adjusting your sexual position. This is not about sex and what you do in the bed, okay? This is how you adjust if you have experienced sexual trauma. Okay. With that being said, this episode is not to shame anyone for any sexual experience they've had willingly or unwillingly. My goal is to bring awareness to the impact sex can have on someone's mental health. All right? Now, sexual trauma looks a lot of ways. But before we get any further in this episode, if anything is triggering, I invite you to pause and come back to it later. If you or anyone you know has experienced sexual trauma or currently experience it, I'm going to give you a number to call. You pause this podcast and you make the call. It's a 24/7 confidential hotline, okay? The number is 1-800-656-4673. Again, 1-800-656-4673. Again, this is a confidential hotline, 24/7. It's for anyone who's experienced rape, sexual abuse, or any type of incest, okay? Now, we will carry on with the episode. Now, I want to talk about the impact of sexual trauma and how it affects your mental health. Most of the signs, or people are quick to point out, they look at how a person reacts, or like they get a twitchy or jumpy when they're around someone. It's just like, oh, they've been abused, or they are quick to judge someone and say, well, they're hypersexual. So that means that that's their way of adjusting to the trauma they've experienced. But here are some signs of someone who has been impacted by sexual abuse or sexual trauma when it comes to mental health. So the first thing is trouble regulating emotions. So there can be three parts to this. A lot of times it looks like grief, but there can be an expressive where you're just either really angry or really sad. There can be disoriented where you're in denial or you're depressed. A lot of people associate with the disoriented aspect of sexual trauma. Like they become very reclusive. The thought of sex just makes them nervous or scared. But then the last one, the controlled emotion that comes with the sexual shame, it's not scary, but those are the people that I worry about the most. The people who are just calm and collected and have this sense of it is what it is. Those are the ones I tend to gravitate towards from a healer perspective. Someone who has experienced some form of sexual trauma in my childhood. I was very collected and calm. I would not, I will not go into detail on this podcast about the sexual trauma I experienced as a child. Just know in therapy, we are working through it. But the controlled people are the ones who are just very calm about it. Just like, I know what happened. I've made peace with it, but making peace with it is not always synonymous with healing from it. Like, are you able to go back to that place and not be triggered? Or have you just brushed it under the rug and just like, that was part of my life, I don't want to talk about it anymore? Another aspect of the impact of sexual trauma is a loss of sense of self. So there comes a lot of gaslighting from the person who abused you, or the person who was abused has a low sense of trust when it comes to potential relationships, potential partnerships, environments. A lot of sexual trauma happens in church. Not the priest. We're not listen, I am not Catholic. I am Baptist. Okay. And I can still tell you sexual trauma happens in a Black church. I'm not saying names, but we're not talking about that pastor either. The next part is dissociation, and those are two parts. It can either be depersonalization or derealization. So derealization is when you see the thing happening as if it's happening to someone else, or depersonalization is when it's very blurry and foggy and you don't really see what's happening. Yes, that is dissociation. Common impacts is PTSD. There's depression. Some people, it leads to suicide because of the triggers and the trauma associated with what happened. And then eating disorders often pop up with the impact of sexual trauma. Now, when it comes to sexual trauma and relationships, and I want to move on. And I know a couple of episodes back we talked about trauma bonds. Sometimes, the commercialized version of trauma bonds, sometimes that can be a thing that pops up and people gravitate to sexual partners, and that is the root of their relationship. Sex, like their whole relationship is based off, are we sexually compatible? To me, to Justin, that is a sign of trauma bonding in the form of sex, because as long as the sex is good, you feel like you're being validated. As long as the sex is enjoyable, you feel that your sense of worth is great. Take sex out the equation. Take sex out the relationship. Do you have a healthy relationship? Or do you just have a consistent sex partner? So that's something to think about. You become dependent on that person to fill a void of some type of emotional dependency that you didn't get. And a lot of it comes from childhood trauma. A lot of it comes from a sexual abuse that might have happened in your childhood, aka childhood trauma. But then when you are in a relationship, you tend to have uh, um, change of your thought process, and just like the guilt comes in, or the shame, or questioning everything. Like, am I worthy of this relationship? Am I enough for this person? Are they going to cheat? Are they going to step out? Um, am I making them happy? The aspect of trauma responses in a relationship, there are four common terms that are used. You have fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. Now, I did cover this in therapy recently, but it was more associated with death. But trauma responses can pop up regardless if it's sexual abuse, um, eating disorder, whatever the case may be. Trauma. Okay. So with fight, you want to be aggressive in the situation. You want to head towards whatever it is and find resolution. With flight, you want to get out of there. You're just like, you know what? This is overwhelming. I can't handle this. I'm gone. Freeze, you are numb. You are stuck in the situation and you don't know what to do. Fawn, FAWN, is when you try to please your way out of the situation. I don't want to say it's people pleasing, but you go with the flow just to keep the peace, and then you're out of there. So those are the four types of trauma responses, especially when it comes to manifesting within a relationship. Also, it can cause you to feel numb. You are just like there for the ride. You don't want to make the other person upset, but it's just like you don't feel it anymore. You're just there. You're just like, I'm just happy to be here. I'm just here so you don't be upset. And then the last thing is it leads to avoidance. So whether it's social or emotional isolation, you just don't want to be bothered. Now, recognizing and addressing shame is another thing that comes with sex. Now, this is where I can really jump into the conversation. In therapy, we were talking about a lot of sexual shame that pops up from church. A lot of people growing up in a Black church, they push the narrative of no sex before marriage. It's in the Bible. It's a thing. However, there are a lot of people that had kids before they were married, and that life went on. A lot of people don't have the luxury of experiencing a household where sex was talked about, but not from a place of defining your manhood or womanhood, but more so the act of what is sex. A lot of people just experience it on their own. Peer pressure. I am not about to put folks' business out there, but I tell you this. 14, I knew what sex was. Okay. And I wasn't having sex at 14. I knew what it was because people around me were having sex. And I'm just like, y'all doing this? Where? Like, ooh, y'all Nancy. But listen, they got it. They told me about it. I'm just like, oh, okay. Listen, live your life. Do you? However, when people find out about like your count, or how many sexual partners you've had, or if people have found out about any type of sexual abuse you've experienced, why are we throwing shame at people? Okay, like it it wasn't something they voluntarily wanted to experience. So I want to separate the aspect of guilt and shame. Now, guilt is a response to a specific event or behavior. Shame, on the other hand, affects how you feel about it. Okay. The shame comes from the stigma associated to the action that happened based on how you feel others might look at you. One more time for the people driving. The shame comes from the stigma associated with the action that happened based on how others might look at you. There is so much sexual shame for people who have certain interest. That's all I'm going to say. I will go into depth with this topic whenever I launch my Patreon platform titled Sex, Shame, and Spirituality, because I get tired of people shaming other people's interests. Like, there are a lot of curious people in these sheets and streets. And I want to create another safe space for you to just talk about. Now, I don't want to see it. I don't want to experience it. I just want you to know that it is okay to like what you like as long as no one is hurt in the process. Okay. So we're gonna end the shame when it comes to sex, especially when it comes to someone's sexual abuse or lived sexual trauma. Y'all gotta stop that. So I'm currently reading this book called It Didn't Start With You. And it's a mental health book that talks about how generational trauma is passed down through generations. Fascinating book. 14 chapters. I'm on chapter 3. But there was a part of the book that talked about how this young man was cold at night, and he was just like, why am I just shivering at night? Like, this has never happened before. Come to find out, his uncle was died in not a snowstorm, but he was working on some electrical wires and basically got lost in the tracks and froze to death. But no one told him about the uncle. And it happened, but because the conversation wasn't passed down, they didn't, I don't know, but this is me speculating. The family didn't heal from that part of them. That unresolved trauma popped up in him. So now he's just like, why am I freezing? Why am I cold? I don't know the science behind this, but I feel that when it comes to sexual trauma, sexual abuse, that is something that passes down. People use sex as a form, like I said, some type of medicine or some type of agent to heal or connect with someone, but but oftentimes it leads to them becoming another victim of abuse. So I pray that with this podcast or this number, you're able to end that stigma or break that cycle, because there is someone out there for you that will love you the way you should. So moving on, we talked about shame. We talked about the 4 types of trauma responses. Now, how do you overcome sexual shame and guilt? Well, there are 3 different types of therapeutic approaches. One is a trauma-informed therapy. The 5 elements of that is safety, choice, collaboration, trustworthiness, and empowerment. Trauma-informed therapy is very popular. It really gets to the root of the trauma, in this case, sexual abuse. Who did it? What emotions and feelings come up, getting it all out. Not only saying making peace with it, but healing from it and then moving forward. It's that cycle again. Sometimes it pops up: the denial, the anger, all those things. But trauma response therapy, trauma informed therapy is great. The second one is somatic experiencing. Now, this one is a releasing of emotions through various exercises. So acupressure and hypnosis. I've never tried this one. I've heard about it. So if that is something you're interested in, somatic experiencing, that's what you do. So the last one is EMDR. EIM movement. D is desensitization, and the R is reprocessing. I read about this one in a book, and I don't know anyone who's experienced it, but I'm hoping in season 2, I can bring on a guest to talk more about EMDR. And a lot of you asked me to talk about Tantric Yoga. So I thought this was a great way to segment into that topic. Again, this is something I will talk about on my Patreon platform, under the platform, or under the topic of sex, shame, and spirituality with Tantric Yoga. So again, I started Tantric Yoga about, I think, 4 or 5 years now, before the pandemic. No, during the pandemic. No, before the pandemic, like 2018. So 5 years ago. And when I started it, one of my friends who was a yoga teacher introduced me to it. He was like, man, this would be great. Really help with honing into the breathing for sex. And I was just like, okay, Who holds their breath doing, like, well, who does that? Not knowing anything about Tantric Yoga, okay? So there's a difference between Tantric Yoga and Tantric Sex. We're talking about the yoga. There are two different types of Tantrikas. There is a white Tantrika, and the white Tantrika is the solo practice or the solo work that you do. The goal is to turn red. Okay, so red is when we're with your partner. It's beautiful if you and your partner both practice tantric yoga. That way, when you're doing your Kegel exercises, your breath of fire, any other breathing exercises, your poses, all that, beautiful. That way you can really connect your energy and then lead to tantric sex. Okay. But my experience has been great. Like I said, 5 years. Each challenge that I do with my tantric yoga teacher, Jason, we do either 21 days or 30 days. And the goal is not to see what the climax at the end is going to be. The goal is to in my opinion, to reprogram your mind, to recenter yourself through the art of breathing and rechanneling your creativity. Like I mentioned in the episode with the chakras, that chakra, the orange chakra, your sexual chakra, is more so about creating life. Because, with sex, you create a baby at the end, male, female. And if you are abstaining and using that energy and pushing it either down to the root or shooting it up to the crown, you're spreading that creativity through other forms. Stay with me. So if you close your eyes and you see energy sitting at the root, you take a deep breath in, you're sending that energy up through the other chakras to the crown and then back down. So once you send it up, you're hitting that creativity chakra, you're hitting your solar plexus, which is like the stomach area. So if it's fitness related, like you're sending that energy there. So when you go work out, you're just like, yeah, I'm really focused. You go up to the heart chakra, you're just like, okay, I'm learning love again. I'm seeing love a different way. You move up to the throat chakra. If you're a public speaker, a singer, someone who is in front of people, you're like, yes, I'm cultivating this energy and I'm using it here. You move it up to your third eye. You're just like, wow, I can really see things differently. Like, flowers look different, food tastes different, music feels different, like those things. And then going up to the crown chakra, you're just like, I'm not the same person. Boom, you send it back down. Everything is just working together. Therefore, it leads to alignment. That is my experience with Tantric Yoga. Okay. So it's not about who you have sex with or what type of sexual positions you do. No. And I really don't appreciate the commercialized aspect of tantric yoga and how everyone thinks it's like some type of orgy. It is not. Okay, it is far from that. Now, I'm not saying it couldn't be that. If that is what you want to do it. I'm not coming. That is just not my cup of tea when it comes to the sacred aspect of sex and the healing nature of it. Because a lot of people are there for the wrong reasons. Okay, a lot of people are there with their trauma and looking for just some type of playground. We're not doing that. No. Now, my friend did ask me, Justin, you should lead a tantric yoga workshop. We'll see. We will see. I want to get a little more experience with it and hopefully go red at some point so I can practice with somebody. But I just wanted to give more insight to tantric yoga. Now, like I said, with tantric sex, there are more aspects of it. My tantric yoga teacher can speak about that for days. There is a book I have. I'll put it on my website. But also, I want to speak about the aspect of tantric sex and how the trauma stored in your body can sometimes be released through the power of sex. And this is why this is why I'm always just apprehensive when it comes to sex. Now, sex, the trauma related in your sex can be stored wherever chakras are supplied. So basically in your hips, your shoulders, your stomach, your neck, your arms, your back. Like, you can store so much trauma there. It's probably why I need a massage because, listen, some depression has creeped in recently. But when you are aligned and with a partner who has some experience with Tantric Yoga and can really help you through breathing through those spaces and releasing that trauma through either, it doesn't even have to be penetration. It can just be some type of massage that can really help with releasing that tension and trauma. Listen, now that's good. That's intimacy, okay? We gotta really get out of the pornographic mindset of sex and think more of intimacy. I really enjoyed the documentary Sex, Love, and Goop. And I was talking to a friend about whether or not they have the conversation about sex expectations with their partner. And I think this is like the perfect way to end the episode. So sex expectations is a term I made up. Not really, but if it is, it's my turn. And it's just about like, what sexual expectations are you taking into the relationship? A lot of people leave a relationship with a mindset that, every time we see each other, every time we hang out, every time we're together, we have to have sex. No, that is rude. That's low key some type of scarcity mindset, or the fact that you think this will be the last time and you just want to do it. You ain't gotta have sex that much. You don't, because it at some point it loses its intimacy. But if you have this expectation conversation and just like, okay, babe, how do you like? What do you want? What do you need in order to feel satisfied? Have that conversation. I don't want to know about what y'all be doing. Okay, maybe y'all need a third person. I don't know. That's between y'all. But have the conversation. Like, really restore that love and the communication in your relationship. Look at me being a sex expert. Kidding. But in the end, I am not telling you to go out there and have sex with, just anybody. I want you to be mindful of who you have sex with and know that sometimes you can pick up somebody's trauma through sex. So just, be careful who you lay with and what positions you put yourself in to be harmed. Okay. But if you are, like I said, someone who has experienced sexual trauma or sexual abuse, my sincere prayer is that something from this episode, whether it's just realizing like, wow, this is really showing up for me, the different aspects of therapy that are available for you, or introduction of Tantric Yoga and how basically rewiring or constructing the way you view sex. I hope one of those three topics helped you and you can take something away from this episode. Until next time, bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. I hope you take something away to help you make the adjustments you need. Before you go, please take a quick second to share this with someone you care about. And if you can, please leave a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you're listening to this on. For more information about adjusting or to inquire about being a guest, head over to adjustingpod.com. Until next time.